Welcome to my channel, The World of Science Fiction. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.
The Derelict spun slow against the void, its hull encrusted with ice thick as armor plating. Miles Corbin's breath fogged inside his helmet as he maneuvered the salvage pod closer, magnetic grapples extending like fingers toward the wreck. The ship had no name anymore, just serial numbers etched beneath the frost, half obscured by decades of accumulated freeze. His scanner flickered. Life sign. Faint, but there. He shouldn't go in. Company protocol said quarantine first, sweep for contamination, wait for the support team. But the readings showed hypothermic collapse imminent, and the storm front rolling across this sector would bury the wreck in ice dense enough to crush steel. He had maybe an hour before this became a tomb. Miles locked the pod to the outer airlock and cycled through. The manual override fought him. Frost had welded the mechanisms together. He wedged his pry bar into the gap and threw his weight against it. Metal shrieked. The inner door gave way with a crack like breaking bone. Cold hit him like a fist. His suit's thermal regulators whined, struggling to compensate. The temperature inside the ship was -40 and dropping. His breath came in sharp gasps as he pushed into the corridor. Ice covered everything. Not the clear, crystalline kind from textbooks. This was milky white, dense as glass, flowing over walls and ceiling in frozen waves. Emergency lighting flickered somewhere deep in the ship's guts, casting pale blue shadows that moved when he did. The floor crunched under his boots. Every surface glittered with frost patterns that looked almost deliberate, almost planned. He followed his scanner deeper. The life sign pulsed ahead, growing stronger. The corridor narrowed, and he had to turn sideways to squeeze past a bulkhead buckled inward by ice pressure. Something had hit this ship hard enough to crack the superstructure. Something that left no debris, no burn marks, just cold. The passage opened into what had been a crew quarters. Two shapes lay on the floor. One was clearly dead, a body frozen mid-crawl, one hand outstretched toward a sealed door. The ice had claimed him completely, encasing him in a translucent shell. Through the frost, Miles could see the man's face, mouth open in a silent scream. The other shape moved. She was young, maybe 20 standard years, curled against the far wall with her knees drawn to her chest. Her skin had taken on a bluish tint, and frost clung to her hair in delicate crystals. She wore thermal gear 3 sizes too large, patched with strips of insulation torn from the walls. One hand clutched a small utility cutter, its fuel cell dead and dark. Her eyes opened as he entered. Black eyes, pupils dilated so wide they swallowed the iris. She tracked his movement with the stillness of a predator. "Eat," she whispered. Her voice was rough, barely audible. "The ice weavers come when they smell hunger." Miles froze. The scanner hadn't mentioned anyone else aboard. He swept the room. No other heat signatures. No movement except the girl's shallow breathing. "Who?" She didn't answer. Her trembling hand lifted, pointing at the frozen corpse. "The fallen feed the living. Law keeps us warm." His stomach turned. The utility cutter in her hand. He understood now why she'd kept it close, why it was clean despite the fuel cell being dead. Ritual maintenance for a tool she might need to use on flesh. He wanted to back away, to seal the airlock and let the company's containment team handle this. But her eyes held him. There was no madness in them, no fever, just a terrible, pragmatic clarity. Something groaned deep in the ship's structure. Not metal fatigue, something moving beneath the ice. "How long have you been here?" he asked. 93 days. She said it without emotion, like reciting coordinates. "The cold came on day 4. The weavers came on day 12. "What weavers?" She tilted her head, listening. Outside the room, beyond the buckled walls, something shifted. A low groaning sound, like pressure building in deep ice. The kind of sound glaciers made when they moved. The emergency lights flickered once, twice. The lights died completely. Miles's helmet lamp snapped on automatically, a narrow cone of white cutting through absolute darkness. The girl's face appeared in the beam, her black eyes reflecting like an animal's. Frost crystals on the walls caught the light, throwing fractured patterns across the ceiling. His suit's power indicator dropped 5%, then another 5. "Battery drain," Miles muttered, checking his systems. "Something's pulling power." You'll see, she whispered. They smell your warmth already. The floor beneath him shuddered. Not an impact. More like something vast rolling over in its sleep. The ice coating the walls rippled, patterns reforming, and for one impossible moment Miles saw shapes in the frost. Tall figures with two long limbs, their outlines blurred by the translucent layers. The lights surged back on. Then they were gone. Just shadows. Just ice. The girl watched him with those black eyes. If you're real, she said, you'll help me stand. If you're another dream, I'll wake up hungry. Miles moved before he could think. He crossed the room and reached for her shoulder to help her up. She flinched violently, jerking away from his touch. The utility cutter came up between them, her hands shaking but her grip firm. Don't, her voice cracked. Nobody touches. That's how they mark you. Miles raised both hands, backing off half a step. I'm not marking you. I'm trying to help. Help! She said the word like testing a foreign language. Her eyes searched his face, looking for deception, for hunger, for whatever she'd learned to fear in 93 days. Why? Because you're alive and I can. She stared at him. Then slowly she lowered the cutter. Her free hand remained pressed against the wall, holding herself upright without accepting his assistance. Your words don't match your law. What law? The only law. Take or be taken. Consume or be consumed. She gestured at the frozen corpse with her chin. He tried to share. The cold took him first. Miles unclipped the heating module from his suit's power distribution node. The warning light flashed immediately. He'd lose 30% thermal efficiency. In this cold, that could kill him in hours. He set it on the floor between them, not offering it, not touching her, just placing it within reach. She stared at the device like it might explode. What is that? Warmth. For what price? No price. Her expression twisted. Confusion, suspicion, something that might have been pain. Everything has a price, that's the first law. Maybe your laws are wrong. A heavy footstep echoed in the corridor outside. Then another. Deliberate. Approaching. The girl's head snapped toward the door, her whole body going rigid. They heard us, she whispered. They heard warmth. Miles grabbed the heating module and pressed it into her hands before she could pull away. Her skin was ice cold against his gloves, her fingers stiff and barely responsive. She gasped, jerking back as heat flooded her frozen flesh. The frost coating her skin began to steam. You... She couldn't finish. Her hands shook violently, nerves firing as circulation returned. She stared at the device, then at him, and something like shock broke through her expression. You gave energy for nothing. Not nothing, Miles said. Can you move? The footsteps in the corridor grew louder. Multiple sets now, moving in synchronized rhythm. She flexed her fingers experimentally. The blue tint was fading, color returning to her fingertips. She looked at him again, and this time her expression held something he couldn't read. Suspicion? Wonder? Your law's wrong, she said quietly. What? My law says warmth must be earned, taken, never given. She lifted the utility cutter, turning it over in her warming hands. But you gave, so either you're stupid or my law's a lie. The floor shuddered again, harder this time. The frozen corpse's outstretched hand snapped off at the wrist. Crack. Cracks spiderwebbed across the ice coating the walls. The door to the corridor buckled inward, frost exploding from the hinges. The girl, Kaylin, her name tag read, barely visible under the oversized thermal gear, pushed herself upright. She moved like someone relearning their body, each motion careful and deliberate. We need to go, before they decide. Decide what? Whether you're food or family. Miles's scanner shrieked a warning. Multiple heat signatures, closing fast from the forward sections. Big ones, moving with coordinated purpose through corridors that should be impassable. Kaylin grabbed his arm. Her grip was weak but insistent. The comm panel, engineering deck, 3 sections forward. If we can route power, we can send a distress beacon, Miles finished. Can you walk? Better than I can run. She tried to smile, but her cracked lips split, blood freezing before it could drip. Your heating module won't last long. Not here. Then we move fast. The door exploded inward. Ice and metal sprayed across the room. Darkness swallowed them. When Miles's vision cleared, they were already running. They stumbled into the corridor together, Kalen leaning heavily on his shoulder. The ice under their feet had changed, no longer smooth but ridged, as if something had pushed up from below and frozen in place. The patterns were clearer now, more distinct. Miles saw what looked like handprints, footprints, shapes pressed into the ice like fossils. "Don't look too long," Kalen whispered. "They don't like being seen." "Who doesn't?" "The Weavers. They're what happens when the cold gets inside you, when you choose ice over blood." She paused, leaning against the wall. "That's what the elders taught, before they became Weavers themselves." Miles's mind raced. Mass hypothermia could cause hallucinations, neurological damage. But the heat signatures on his scanner were real, and moving faster now, cutting through sections he'd mapped as completely blocked. They reached the engineering section. The door was sealed with ice 3 inches thick. Miles pulled his plasma torch from his belt and ignited it, the blue flame hissing against the frozen barrier. Steam billowed, obscuring his vision. Through the clearing vapor, Miles caught his reflection in a sheet of ice beside the door, his face distorted by the uneven surface. Behind him, Kalen's reflection, gaunt, desperate. And behind her, tall shapes moved through the corridor, blurred but approaching. The moment crystallized in ice. Predator, prey, witness. He turned away and cut faster. Kalen pressed close, her voice in his ear. "My cutter. The fuel cell is dead, but the mechanism works. Give it power, and I can cut faster." He hesitated. The heating module was keeping her alive. If he pulled it to power her tool... "I can handle cold," she said, reading his expression. "Better than you. I was born in it. But we need that panel open before they arrive." Miles made the calculation. Survival meant signal. Signal meant the cutter. He yanked the heating module free and clipped it to her utility cutter's power port. The blade hummed to life, glowing cherry red. Kalen's breath caught, not from pain but something else. Recognition, maybe, or memory. She plunged the heated blade into the ice. It cut like flesh, steam erupting in billowing clouds. Within seconds, she carved a hole large enough to reach through. Miles grabbed the door's manual release and hauled it open. The engineering deck was a cathedral of frozen pipes and silent machinery. The main reactor was dead, its core dark and cold. But the backup comm panel still showed a standby light, emergency power, barely trickling. "There," Kalen pointed with the glowing cutter. "Route auxiliary power through the antenna array. Maybe we get enough signal strength to punch through the storm." Miles ran to the panel, his frozen fingers fumbling with the access codes. The system was ancient, pre-standard interface, and half the readouts were frozen solid. He had to work by feel, following cable runs and power conduits by touch alone. Behind him, Kalen stood guard at the door, the cutter raised. The blade's glow reflected off the ice, casting her shadow long across the floor. She didn't move, didn't speak, just watched the corridor with those black eyes. "Got it," Miles said. "Routing power now. Signal strength is..." He checked the readout. 20%, 30. It's climbing. "Too slow," Kalen whispered. Miles heard it then. Footsteps, heavy, deliberate, moving through the ship with terrible purpose. And beneath that, a sound like wind through ice caves, breathing, if the cold itself could breathe. The scanner went wild. The heat signatures had arrived. They filled the corridor beyond the engineering deck, massive shapes that moved with glacial patience. Miles's first thought was suits, environmental gear, powered armor, anything rational. But as they emerged from the steam and shadows, he saw the truth. They were human, or had been. Tall figures wrapped in layers of frozen flesh, their skin blue-white and hard as porcelain. Frost grew from their shoulders like fur, and their eyes were solid ice, blind but seeing. They moved in perfect synchronization, each step matched, each breath aligned. The ice on the walls responded to them, patterns flowing and reforming to their rhythm. The leader stepped forward. He stood 7 feet tall, his body grotesquely swollen with frozen tissue. When he spoke, his voice resonated through the deck plating, through the very structure of the ship. "Kalen, daughter of ice, you survived." She didn't lower the cutter. "I survived you, father. The word hit Miles like a physical blow. He looked at Kalen's profile, the sharp features, the black eyes. Then at the massive figure before them. The resemblance was there, buried under layers of frozen mutation, but visible. "You kept the meat warm," the chieftain said, his ice eyes fixed on Miles. "Unusual choice, but perhaps wise. Fresh meat is hard to find." Miles's hand dropped to his multi-tool. Not a weapon, a maintenance device, good for cutting cable and prying panels. Useless against these things. "He's not meat," Kalen said. Her voice was steady, but Miles could see her hands shaking. "He gave warmth freely. That makes him kin." Laughter rolled through the assembled weavers, a sound like cracking ice. "Kin?" the chieftain rumbled. "There is no kin except ice. You know the law, daughter. The fallen feed the living. The weak become fuel. That is how we survive. That's how you die slowly," Kalen shot back. "Trading blood for cold, warmth for hunger. Look at yourself, father. You're not alive. You're preserved." The chieftain took another step forward. The floor groaned under his weight. "And yet I stand while you shiver. I endure while you fade. Perhaps that is enough." "Then why are you here?" Miles heard himself ask. Every instinct screamed to stay silent, invisible. But the question came out anyway, sharp and clear. "If your way works, why come for us?" The chieftain's head turned with mechanical slowness, those ice eyes fixed on Miles, and the temperature dropped another 10 degrees. "Because," the creature said, "she chose warmth, and that choice is infection. If she survives outside the law, others will choose. The ice will fragment. Chaos will replace order. So you're here to kill her. I am here to offer choice. Join us in the cold." The chieftain extended one massive hand toward Kalen. "Or prove your loyalty by taking his heat." Kalen went perfectly still. The cutter in her hand hummed with borrowed warmth. Miles's energy, given freely, now returned to her as a weapon. The weavers waited. The ice creaked around them, a sound like judgment pending. "Kalen," the chieftain said again, "the law does not bend. Make your choice." She looked at Miles. He saw the calculation in her eyes, the same cold logic that had kept her alive through 93 days of frozen hell. The smart choice was obvious. Survival meant sacrifice. It always had. He could run, try to make it back to the salvage pod, but the weavers blocked every exit, and his suit's thermal reserves were nearly exhausted. He'd be dead in minutes. So he stood still and met her eyes and tried to convey what he couldn't say aloud, that he understood, that he didn't blame her, that survival trumped ethics when the cold got this deep. Kalen's hand tightened on the cutter. The blade flared brighter, fed by his heating module's last reserves. She took a step forward, positioning herself between Miles and the assembled weavers. "You taught me the law," she said to her father. "The fallen feed the living, the weak become fuel." She raised the cutter, its glow reflecting in her black eyes. "But you never explained why the strong don't feed themselves." The chieftain tilted his head. "What? If weakness is fuel, what makes you strong? The cold? You didn't earn it. You surrendered to it. You didn't choose ice. You just stopped fighting." She gestured at the assembled weavers with the glowing blade. "You're not survivors. You're the fallen. You just refuse to lie down." Silence, the kind that precedes avalanches. Then the chieftain moved. Not fast. Nothing about the weavers was fast, but inevitable, like a glacier advancing. His massive hand reached for Kalen's throat. Miles grabbed her shoulder and pulled her back. The chieftain's fingers closed on empty air, the sound of his grip like stone grinding. Miles yanked Kalen behind him and raised his multi-tool. "Stop," he said. Not shouted, just stated. Flat and certain. The chieftain paused. "You threaten me with a maintenance device?" Miles didn't answer. He pressed the multi-tool against the ceiling and triggered its plasma torch function. The beam lanced upward, punching through frozen metal and into the cooling system beyond. Superheated vapor exploded from the breach. The weavers recoiled, their frozen bodies unable to cope with sudden warmth. Steam filled the engineering deck, obscuring vision, and in that chaos, Miles grabbed Kalen's hand and ran. They crashed through the forward passage, ice shattering under their boots. Behind them, the weavers howled. a sound that had no words, just rage and hunger mixed. The ship trembled, structural supports groaning as the weavers gave chase. "The airlock," Kalen gasped. "If we seal them inside, they'll freeze us out. We need leverage." "Where? What leverage?" Miles's mind raced. The weavers moved through cold like water. Heat hurt them but wouldn't stop them. But they were still human underneath the ice, still bound by human needs. Oxygen. He changed direction, dragging Kalen toward the ship's life support hub. The controls were frozen but functional. Emergency protocols designed to survive anything, including cold. "What are you doing?" Kalen demanded. "Buying time." He accessed the environmental controls and triggered the purge sequence. Alarms screamed as the system began venting atmosphere, evacuating air section by section. "They're still breathing," he said. "Even weavers need oxygen." The ship shuddered. The weavers were close, their footsteps echoing through the superstructure. But the environmental system was faster. Pressure dropped, air howling through emergency vents. In seconds, the forward sections would be vacuum. Miles sealed the bulkhead behind them and locked it. "That won't hold them long." "Long enough," Kalen said. She held up the utility cutter, still glowing, still warm with his energy. "The panel. We need to finish the signal." They ran back to engineering. The comm panel's readout showed 50% signal strength now, climbing slowly. Not enough to punch through the storm. Not enough to reach anyone who could help. Kalen grabbed the power cables and began splicing them together, her fingers moving with desperate speed. Bypass the safeties, route everything. Life support, auxiliary, emergency reserves. All of it into the antenna. That'll kill the ship's backup systems. The ship's already dead. She looked at him, and for the first time since he'd found her, she smiled. Not a comfortable expression. Her cracked lips split further, blood freezing on her chin, but genuine. "We're just making sure something survives." Miles helped her splice the cables. Sparks flew as they forced power through systems never designed for this load. The antenna array thrummed to life, drawing energy from every functional cell in the ship's dying carcass. The signal strength jumped to 80%, 90, 100. The distress beacon launched, punching through the storm with enough power to reach the nearest relay station. Miles felt the transmission go out, a pulse of electromagnetic energy so strong it made his teeth ache. "Done," Kalen whispered. "Help is coming." The bulkhead behind them exploded inward. Ice and metal flew in deadly shrapnel. The weavers poured through, moving faster now, desperation overriding their glacial patience. The chieftain's voice boomed. "You have chosen, daughter. So be it." Miles and Kalen backed against the comm panel. Nowhere left to run. The weavers spread out, surrounding them, cutting off every exit. The temperature plummeted. Miles's suit readouts showed -60 and falling. His joints locked up, servo motors freezing solid. He could barely move. Kalen raised the utility cutter. Its glow was fading, the heating module nearly depleted. She held it between them and the weavers, a pathetic defense against overwhelming force. "Listen to me," she said, not to the weavers, to Miles. "When they take me, run. Find the auxiliary airlock. Seal yourself in. The rescue team will find you." "What about you?" "I'm already dead." She said it matter-of-factly. "The cold's been inside me since day 12. I'm not surviving this. But you can." "No." Miles forced his frozen joints to move, positioning himself beside her instead of behind. "We both survive, or neither does." She stared at him. "That's stupid." "Probably, but I didn't come this far to watch you feed yourself to these things." The chieftain laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Touching, but futile. He extended both massive hands toward them. "Come, Kalen. Come home to the ice. Bring your pet with you. His warmth will feed us for weeks." Kalen's hand found Miles's. Her grip was weak, her skin so cold it burned. But she squeezed once, hard, and he understood. Not surrender, solidarity. Together they faced the weavers. Together they raised their pathetic defenses, a dying cutter and an empty multi-tool. Together they prepared to lose. The chieftain reached for them, and the ice beneath his feet shattered, not cracked, not broken, shattered, exploding upward in a geyser of frozen fragments. The chieftain stumbled, his massive weight suddenly unsupported. He crashed to his knees, roaring confusion and rage. The other weavers scattered, their formation broken. They looked down, searching for the cause, and Miles saw their expressions change from confidence to fear. The ice was moving, not melting, reforming. The patterns that had covered every surface since he'd entered the ship were shifting, realigning, reshaping themselves into something new. Something deliberate. Shapes emerged from the walls. Not weavers, something else. Smaller, more delicate, but numerous beyond counting. They formed from frost and cold and the ship's accumulated freeze, taking on structure and purpose. Miles's scanner couldn't parse them. The readouts showed thermal anomalies, mass fluctuations, probability errors. His scientific mind rejected what his eyes witnessed, but Kaylin understood. The others, she whispered, the ones who died, the ones we thought became food. She looked at the shapes, dozens, hundreds, all forming from the ice. They're still here. The frozen spirits surged forward. They didn't attack the weavers with violence. They simply surrounded them, engulfed them, bore them down through weight of numbers. The weavers fought, their massive fists smashing through frost shapes, but for everyone destroyed, 3 more formed. The chieftain roared defiance, his voice shaking the deck. You cannot stop us. We are the law. We are survival. One of the frost shapes drifted close to him, small, delicate, barely visible. It placed a translucent hand against the chieftain's face. No, it whispered in a voice like wind. You are the weak, preserved but not alive, enduring but not surviving. More frost shapes joined it, surrounding the massive weaver. We are the fallen, and we remember what you chose. The chieftain's ice eyes widened. Recognition, horror. You should be consumed, recycled. That is the law. Your law, the frost shape said, not ours. The weavers were dragged backward, pulled toward the hull breach they'd entered through. They fought every meter, but the frost shapes were relentless, patient as glaciers, inevitable as winter. The chieftain's gaze found Kaylin one last time. Daughter! I'm not your daughter, she said. Not anymore. The weavers vanished into the storm beyond the hull. The frost shapes followed, sealing the breach behind them with fresh ice. In seconds, the engineering deck was silent again. Just Miles, Kaylin, and the ghosts in the frost. One shape remained. It drifted close to Kaylin, its features almost recognizable. A woman's face, kind but worn. She reached out, not to touch but to gesture. A blessing, maybe, or farewell. Mom? Kaylin's voice cracked. The shape smiled. Then it dissipated, flowing back into the ice, patterns reforming one final time before going still. Silence. Miles's legs gave out. He slumped against the comm panel, his suit's warnings screaming failure on every system. Kaylin collapsed beside him, the utility cutter falling from her nerveless fingers. Did that just happen? Miles asked. I don't know. Kaylin's laugh was broken, edging toward hysteria. Maybe we're both frozen. Maybe we're dreaming. Maybe... The comm panel beeped, a response to their distress signal. ETA 40 minutes, medical team en route. Or maybe, Miles said, we survived. But as he spoke, his vision blurred. The edges of the room darkened, tunnel vision closing in. His suit's thermal readouts were flatline. No heat, no reserves, systems dying one by one. Miles? Kaylin's voice sounded distant, underwater. Miles, stay awake. He tried to answer, but his jaw wouldn't move. Couldn't move. The cold had finally caught him, sinking claws deep into his core. His eyes drifted closed despite every effort to keep them open. In the darkness behind his eyelids, he saw movement, shapes in frost. The patterns on the walls weren't still anymore. They were shifting, reforming, and for one terrible moment he thought the weavers had returned. But the shape that formed wasn't a weaver. It was small, delicate. A woman's face emerging from ice crystals, features kind but worn. The same face that had blessed Kaylin before dissolving. The frost mother drifted closer to Miles's fading consciousness. She reached out, not to touch, but to offer something. Her translucent hand opened, revealing a flicker of light. Warmth, preserved from the fallen. Given freely. Not yet, she whispered in a voice like wind through frozen corridors. You gave when you had nothing left. Now receive. The warmth flowed into him, not physical heat, but something deeper, the will to hold on, to wait, to trust that help was coming. His eyes snapped open. Kaylin's face hovered above him, tears frozen on her cheeks. She'd wrapped both thermal blankets around him, sacrificing her own warmth to keep him alive. Her lips were blue, her hands shaking violently as she pressed them against his chest, trying to share what little heat remained in her body. Don't you dare, she hissed through chattering teeth. Don't you dare leave me here alone. Not after everything. Not leaving, Miles managed. His voice was barely a whisper. Just resting. Bullshit. Your core temp is dropping. The rescue team won't make it in time if you... Her voice cracked. I need you to fight, like you made me fight. Please. The frost patterns on the walls pulsed once, gently. A reminder. A promise. The fallen were still watching. Miles forced his frozen fingers to move, to find Kaylin's hand. Together, he whispered. Both survive, or neither. She squeezed his hand so hard it hurt. Then we both survive. You hear me? Both. Time became strange. Seconds stretched into hours, minutes compressed into heartbeats. They huddled together in the frozen dark, two people clinging to warmth and consciousness with equal desperation. Miles's awareness drifted in and out, skating the edge of hypothermic shutdown. Each time he started to slip away, Kaylin would shake him, whisper to him, force him back. And each time in the space between waking and freezing, he saw the frost shapes, patient, protective, holding vigil until help arrived. The rescue ship's docking clamps engaging sounded like thunder. Kaylin looked at him, really looked, for the first time without calculation or fear or cold logic. You gave me your heat, your power, everything that kept you alive. Why? Because, Miles said, that's what keeps us human. She was quiet for a moment. Then she leaned against him, sharing what little warmth remained between them. Your law is insane, she whispered. Yeah, but it works. Sometimes. That's enough. They sat together in the frozen dark, waiting for rescue. Around them, the ice held its patterns, not threatening now, but protective. The fallen feeding the living in a way the weavers never understood, not through consumption, through sacrifice, through choice. 40 minutes passed like 40 hours. The rescue ship docked with controlled precision, medics flooding through in sealed suits with portable heaters. They found Miles and Kaylin huddled together, hypothermic but alive, surrounded by frost patterns that looked almost like prayers. The medics wrapped them in thermal blankets and injected them with metabolic boosters. Sensation returned in waves of agony. Blood flow resuming, nerves firing, frozen tissue thawing. Miles screamed. Kaylin didn't, but her hand clamped on his arm hard enough to bruise. You're going to make it, the lead medic said. Professional reassurance delivered 1,000 times. Both of you, against incredible odds. You must have done something right. Miles looked at Kaylin. She looked back. And despite everything, the pain, the cold, the 93 days of frozen hell, she smiled. We broke the law, she said. The medic frowned, not understanding. Good, Miles said. It was a terrible law anyway. They were carried to the rescue ship on stretchers, side by side, their hands still linked. Behind them, the derelict spun silent in the void, its hull covered in ice that held the memory of the fallen, patterns that would remain long after the ship itself was salvaged or scrapped. A monument, maybe, or a warning. In the rescue ship's medical bay, pumped full of drugs and wrapped in warming blankets, Miles drifted toward unconscious. His last thought before darkness took him was of Kaylin's hand in his, still cold but growing warmer. Still alive. Both of them. He slept. Kaylin didn't sleep. She lay in the medical bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind replaying the last 3 months. The cold, the hunger, the choice her father made, and the choice she refused to make. She thought about the law of ice. The fallen feed the living. Simple, brutal, wrong. She thought about Miles, a stranger who gave his warmth for nothing, expected nothing, survived by breaking every rule she'd been taught. She thought about her mother's face in the frost, smiling approval at the choice Kaylin made. The medic checked her vitals, noted the readings, moved on. Standard procedure. But Kaylin caught his arm. "How long?" she asked. "Until you're cleared for release?" "At least a week. The hypothermia damage was extensive." "No. How long until you salvage that ship?" The medic hesitated. "Why?" "Because there are bodies on it. People who died believing the only way to survive was to consume each other. They deserve better than that. They deserve to be remembered differently." The medic made a note on his datapad. "I'll pass it up the chain, but ships like that, this far out, usually they just get left as hazard markers." Kaylin's hand tightened on his arm. "Not this one. This one matters." "Why?" "Because," she said, "it's where I learned that warmth is stronger than cold, that sacrifice is stronger than consumption, that the only law worth following is the one that says we choose each other over ourselves." The medic studied her. Then he nodded. "I'll make sure they know." He left. Kaylin lay back, her eyes closing. For the first time in 93 days, she felt warm. Not just physically, though the blankets and boosters helped, but deeper. A warmth that came from inside, from the choice she'd made and the price she'd refused to pay. In the bed beside hers, Miles stirred. His hand reached out, searching for hers even in sleep. She took it, squeezing gently. "Thank you," she whispered. He probably couldn't hear, probably wouldn't remember even if he could. But she said it anyway because some things needed to be spoken. Some debts needed to be acknowledged. Some laws needed to be rewritten. The rescue ship's engines thrummed, carrying them toward stations and warmth and lives they'd almost lost. Behind them, the derelict receded, its ice glittering in the void. A tomb that became a cradle, a law that became a lesson. Kaylin closed her eyes and let herself drift. For the first time since the cold came, she wasn't afraid of what waited in the darkness. Because she'd learned something the Weavers never understood. You don't survive by taking. You survive by giving. By choosing warmth even when cold is easier. By standing together when standing alone would be smarter. By breaking the law when the law's wrong. She slept, Miles slept. Together they healed, their bodies knitting themselves back together, their spirits recovering from 93 days of frozen hell. And on the derelict, in the empty corridors and silent rooms, the ice held its patterns. The frost shapes rested, their vigil ended. The fallen slept at last, their hunger satisfied not by consumption, but by witness. They had seen choice triumph over law, warmth defeat cold, sacrifice overcome survival. That was enough. That was everything. Weeks passed. Miles and Kaylin recovered in the station medical facility, their bodies healing, but their minds struggling to process what they'd survived. The company investigators came, asking questions, taking statements, examining the data from Miles's suit recorder. They didn't believe most of it. Ice weavers and frost shapes didn't fit in official reports. Hallucinations from extreme hypothermia made better documentation. Shared delusions caused by thermal stress and oxygen deprivation. Miles and Kaylin let them believe it. Some truths weren't meant for reports. On the day they were cleared for release, they met in the facility's observation lounge. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out across the station, the void beyond, the distant star that warmed this sector. Normal light, normal warmth, nothing frozen, nothing hunting. Kaylin wore station-issue clothes, still too large but better than the patched thermal gear. Her hair had been cut short during surgery, revealing the sharp angles of her face. Her eyes were brown now, not black. Medication had corrected the extreme pupil dilation. She looked almost normal. Almost. Miles wore civilian clothes. His company ID surrendered the same day the investigators closed their case. He'd been offered a bonus for exceptional salvage recovery under adverse conditions. He'd refused it. Money felt obscene measured against what they'd survived. They stood at the window in silence, watching ships come and go, traffic flowing through the void like blood through veins. Normal life continuing as if 93 days of frozen hell meant nothing. "Where will you go?" Miles asked finally. Kaylin shrugged. "Don't know. Station hopping maybe. Find work. Try to remember how to live without expecting everything to freeze." She glanced at him. You. Same. Maybe find a ship that needs crew. Something that keeps moving, never stays in one place long enough to get cold. Running from it? Learning from it? He met her eyes. I gave you warmth and we both survived. That's not nothing. That's everything. Kaylin nodded slowly. The law of warmth instead of ice. Something like that. They stood in comfortable silence watching the void. Then Kaylin said, I looked up the recovery report. They're towing the derelict to salvage, stripping it for parts. The ice will be melted, recycled, processed. Good. Is it? She turned to face him fully. Everything that happened, everything we learned, it gets erased, melted down. The weavers are gone, the frost shapes are gone, and all that's left are two people with a story nobody believes. Miles considered. Maybe that's enough. Maybe the law doesn't need monuments or proof. Maybe it just needs to be lived. By who? Us? Why not? Kaylin laughed, genuine this time without edges. You really are insane. Probably, but I'm alive. He extended his hand. Want to stay that way together? She stared at his hand, the same hand that had pressed a heating module against her frozen fingers, giving warmth for nothing, expecting nothing, surviving by breaking every rule. She took it. Yeah, let's stay alive. They walked out of the observation lounge together, their hands linked, their bodies healing, their minds carrying the weight of 93 days that would never make it into any official record. But they knew, they remembered, and that was enough. Behind them, through the station's windows, the derelict appeared briefly as the salvage tugs repositioned it for processing. Ice still covered its hull, patterns still visible across the frozen surfaces. For one moment, those patterns seemed to shift, seemed to form faces, hands, gestures of farewell. Then the ship rotated out of view, and the patterns were gone, and all that remained was void and stars and the normal warmth of a living station. Kaylin squeezed Miles's hand once. He squeezed back. They didn't look behind them. They walked forward, together, into whatever came next, into warmth and life and the simple, radical act of choosing each other over survival, into a law they wrote themselves, the law of warmth, the law of choice, the law of holding hands in the dark and refusing to let go even when the cold comes, even when hunger screams, even when every instinct says consume or be consumed. They walked forward, and somewhere in the ice and void, the fallen rested, their vigil ended, their hunger satisfied, their lesson delivered. Warmth beats cold. Always. 3 months later, Miles found work on a supply runner called the Meridian, a mid-range hauler that moved pharmaceuticals and emergency supplies between outer stations. The crew was small, professional, and asked no questions about his time on the derelict. The captain had seen the salvage reports, recognized his name, and hired him on the spot. Anyone who survives -60 for an hour earns their berth, she'd said. Kaylin signed on 2 weeks after him. Different ship initially, a mining support vessel working the asteroid belt, but the routes crossed, and one day she simply transferred her contract and appeared in the Meridian's crew quarters with a duffel bag and that same half-smile. Couldn't let you have all the warmth, she said. They worked different shifts mostly. He handled maintenance and systems repair. She ran logistics and inventory, professional distance, crew regulations. But every few days their schedules aligned and they'd find themselves in the galley during quiet hours, sharing coffee in silence. They didn't talk about the derelict, didn't need to. The understanding lived in small gestures. The way she'd check his suit seals before EVA work, the way he'd slip extra ration bars into her locker when supply runs went long. Taking care of each other without acknowledging it. The law of warmth practiced quietly. The Meridian's route took them through the sector where the derelict had been salvaged. Miles watched from the observation blister as they passed the coordinates, but nothing remained, just void and distant stars, the ice long since melted and recycled. Kaylin found him there. She didn't speak, just stood beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. You think about it? She asked finally. Every day. Me too. She was quiet for a moment. Sometimes I dream I'm still there, that you were the hallucination, not the weavers, that I'm going to wake up cold and alone, and 93 days will start over. Miles turned to look at her. And when you wake up? I check to make sure you're real. That this, she gestured at the ship, the crew, the normal life they'd found, isn't the dream. He understood. Some trauma didn't heal. It just became part of the foundation you built on. I'm real. We're real. This is real. I know. But her hand found his anyway, just to be sure. They stood together, watching the void where the derelict had been, where the weavers had made their stand, where the fallen had risen one last time to ensure warmth defeated cold. Do you think they're at peace? Kaelin asked. The ones in the ice? My mother? The others? Miles considered. I think they finished what they started, taught what they needed to teach. Yeah, I think they're at peace. Good. Kaelin leaned her head against his shoulder. A small intimacy, carefully offered. Because I want to be at peace too, eventually. We'll get there. How do you know? Because we chose each other, and that choice keeps compounding. Every day we wake up and decide to keep choosing. That's the law beating back the cold. Kaelin was quiet for a long time. Then she said very softly, My father was wrong. About what? Everything. The ice, the hunger, the law. He thought strength came from taking, from consuming, from making yourself hard enough to survive anything. She lifted her head, meeting Miles's eyes. But you showed me different. Strength comes from giving, from staying soft enough to feel, from choosing warmth even when cold is easier. That's not strength, Miles said. That's just being human. Maybe that's the same thing. He smiled. Maybe it is. The ship's intercom crackled. Shift change, new orders, the normal rhythm of life continuing. They had work to do, systems to maintain, cargo to manage, the practical demands of survival in the void. But before they left the observation blister, Kaelin squeezed his hand one more time. Thank you, she said, for breaking the law. Thank you, Miles replied, for letting me. They parted to their separate duties, the moment ending as all moments must. But the warmth remained, not dramatic, not overwhelming, just steady, present, real. The law of warmth in practice. Months became a year. The Meridian's route expanded, taking them deeper into the outer stations, farther from the core systems. Hard territory, dangerous territory, the kind of space where ships went missing and nobody looked too hard for answers. Miles and Kaelin stayed close. Not romantically, something deeper than that, forged in frozen corridors and impossible choices. Partnership, maybe, or the kind of bond that forms when two people survive something that should have killed them and come out the other side changed. Other crew members noticed but said nothing. The captain was pleased. They worked well together, anticipated each other's needs, covered each other's weaknesses. Good efficiency, good teamwork. What they didn't see was the way Kaelin still checked Miles's suit seals with ritual care, or the way Miles still slipped extra supplies into her locker before long hauls. The quiet continuation of the law they'd written together. One day, 2 years after the derelict, the Meridian received a distress call. A small research vessel, stranded after reactor failure. Crew of 3 reporting hypothermic conditions. Standard rescue scenario, well within the Meridian's capabilities. The captain looked at Miles and Kaelin. You two, suit up. Let's bring them home. They geared up in silence, checking each other's equipment with practiced efficiency. But as they prepared to board the rescue pod, Kaelin paused. It's going to be cold, she said. Statement, not question. Yeah. And we're going to go in anyway. Miles met her eyes, saw the fear there, the memory of 93 days, the knowledge of what cold could do. We don't have to. Captain can send someone else. Kaelin shook her head. No, we learned this for a reason. Time to use it. They boarded the rescue pod together. As they approached the stranded vessel, Miles saw ice forming on the hull, not as thick as the derelict, but growing. The temperature readings were bad and dropping. Ready? He asked. Kaelin checked her heating module. Fully charged, maintained with ritual care. Ready. They entered the stricken ship. The crew was alive but fading, huddled in the crew quarters with improvised insulation and failing thermal gear. 3 people, young, scared, hypothermia setting in. Miles and Kalen moved with coordinated efficiency. They distributed heating modules, administered metabolic boosters, wrapped the survivors in thermal blankets. Professional rescue work, no different than a dozen other recoveries, except it was different, because Miles and Kalen understood what these people were feeling in a way no manual could teach. The creeping cold, the desperate hunger, the way survival logic twisted until consumption seemed reasonable. As they worked, one of the survivors, a young woman with frost in her hair, grabbed Kalen's arm. "We were going to," she whispered, her eyes finding another survivor. "We were talking about the fallen feeding the living. We heard about it. The ice law. We thought." "No," Kalen said firmly. "That law's broken. There's a better way." "What way?" Kalen pressed a heating module into the woman's hands. "This way. Warmth given freely. No cost, no consumption. Just choice." The woman stared at the device, tears freezing on her cheeks. "Why?" "Because," Miles said, arriving with another survivor. "That's what keeps us human." They evacuated all 3 survivors to the Meridian. No one died. No one was consumed. The cold didn't win. As they stripped out of their suits back on the Meridian, Kalen was shaking. Not from cold, from memory, from the proximity to 93 days of hell, from the knowledge of how close those survivors had come to making the same choice her father made. Miles gave her space to process. But when she looked at him, her eyes were clear. "We did it right," she said. "Yeah. The law works. Yeah. Then we keep teaching it. Every rescue, every stranded crew, every time the cold comes, we show them there's another way." Miles nodded. "The law of warmth. The law of choice." They stood together in the equipment bay. 2 people who'd survived impossible cold and come back with impossible knowledge. The kind of knowledge that couldn't be written in manuals or taught in training. The kind that had to be lived, demonstrated, practiced until it became second nature. They would teach it. Every rescue, every encounter, every time someone faced the choice between consumption and compassion, they would show the better way, not because it was easy, because it was necessary, because warmth beats cold, always. The captain found them there an hour later. "Good work," she said. "Clean rescue, no complications. You 2 make a hell of a team." "Thank you, Captain," Miles said. The captain hesitated, studying them. The survivors. They mentioned something about you 2 understanding, about knowing what they were facing. She paused. "The official reports about your salvage op. They mentioned hypothermia, hallucinations, standard trauma. But there was other data, redacted data, things that didn't make sense." Miles and Kalen exchanged glances. "What really happened out there?" the captain asked quietly. Kalen spoke first. "We learned that survival isn't about taking, it's about giving. That the only law worth following is the one that says we choose each other over ourselves." The captain waited, but no more explanation came. Finally, she nodded. "All right. Keep that between you if you need to. Just," she looked at them seriously, "keep doing what you're doing. Whatever you learned out there, it works. Don't lose it." "We won't," Miles promised. The captain left. Miles and Kalen remained, their unspoken understanding deepening. They'd found their purpose, not just surviving, but ensuring others survived differently, breaking the ice law wherever they found it, replacing it with something better, something warm. Years passed. The Meridian continued its roots. Miles and Kalen continued their partnership, and the law of warmth spread quietly through their actions. They didn't preach it, didn't explain it, just lived it, demonstrated it, made it real through small choices and large ones. Other crews noticed. Word spread in the informal networks that connected outer station workers. If you got stranded, if you got cold, if you started thinking about the ice law, pray the Meridian finds you, because those 2 know something different, something that might save you from yourself. 5 years after the derelict, Kalen received a message, a name she recognized, one of the survivors they'd rescued, the young woman with frost in her hair. "I joined a rescue crew," the message said, "because of what you taught me. I'm teaching others now. The law of warmth. It spreads easier than you'd think. Warmth always does." Kalen showed Miles the message. He smiled. "It's working." Yeah. She leaned against him, comfortable with the contact now, the careful distance they'd maintained eroded by years of partnership. We're not just breaking the ice law, we're replacing it. One rescue at a time, one choice at a time. They stood together, watching the void through the Meridian's observation port, two people who'd survived impossible cold and chosen to carry warmth forward. The law they'd written wasn't in any manual, wasn't taught in any academy, but it lived in their actions, their choices, their stubborn insistence that giving was stronger than taking. And it spread, quietly, persistently, warmth melting ice 1 degree at a time. 10 years after the derelict, the Meridian docked at a frontier station for resupply. Miles and Kaylin had become fixtures on the ship, senior crew now, training younger members in the practical work of rescue and the unspoken work of compassion. At the station, a memorial had been erected. Simple design, a column of transparent material filled with water that cycled between liquid and frozen states. A plaque at the base read, "In memory of those lost to the ice, warmth breaks all laws." Kaylin stopped in front of it, her breath catching. "You know who funded this?" Miles asked, reading the dedication. Frontier Rescue Coalition, made up of survivors from cold-related incidents across the sector. "How many?" Kaylin whispered. 73 crews, hundreds of individuals, all taught the law of warmth by someone who learned it from someone else. He looked at her. "It started with us. Now it's bigger than us." Kaylin reached out, her hand resting on the memorial's surface. The water inside was freezing, ice crystals forming in beautiful, delicate patterns. But even as she watched, warmth from the memorial's core began melting them, returning the ice to liquid, to flow, to life. "My father was wrong," she said again, the same words she'd spoken years ago, but with deeper conviction now. "The ice law doesn't keep you alive. It just keeps you preserved. This," she gestured at the memorial, at the station, at the network of warmth they'd helped create. "This is what keeps you alive." Miles stood beside her, his hand finding hers. Automatic now, natural, the physical expression of a bond forged in frozen hell and tempered by years of living the better way. "Do you think they'd be proud?" Kaylin asked softly. "The ones in the ice? My mother? I think they taught us so this could happen, so the law could change, so warmth could win." Miles squeezed her hand. "Yeah, I think they're proud." They stood together in front of the memorial, two people who'd broken an ancient law and replaced it with something better, something that spread not through force but through demonstration, not through preaching but through practice. The law of warmth, proven again and again, rescue after rescue, choice after choice, unbreakable, eternal, stronger than any ice. That evening, they sat in the station's observation lounge, watching ships come and go, traffic flowing through the void. Similar to the first station where they'd recovered, but changed. Warmer somehow, even though space itself remained the same cold vacuum. "What do you think happens next?" Miles asked. Kaylin considered. "We keep going, keep teaching, keep breaking the ice law wherever we find it. For how long? Until we can't anymore, until someone else takes over, until the law of warmth is so ingrained that no one remembers there was ever another way." Miles smiled. "That could take lifetimes. Good thing we started early." They sat in comfortable silence, their hands linked, their partnership solid. Around them, other crew members came and went, living their own lives, making their own choices. Some would learn the law of warmth, some wouldn't, but the opportunity was there, demonstrated by two people who'd survived impossible cold and refused to let it define them. As night cycle approached and the lounge emptied, Kaylin spoke one more time. "Do you ever regret it, giving me your heating module that first time, choosing to help instead of walking away?" Miles looked at her, really looked, seeing not just the woman she'd become, but the girl frozen in a derelict, desperate and alone, her utility cutter clean and ready because the ice law said the fallen must feed the living. He saw what she'd become instead, strong not from taking, but from giving, alive not from consuming, but from choosing. "No," he said simply. "Best decision I ever made." Kaylin leaned her head against his shoulder, a gesture of trust and affection and partnership that had taken years to build. "Mine too." They sat together as the station's lights dimmed for night cycle. Two people at peace with impossible memories, content with hard-won wisdom, satisfied with a simple law that had spread farther than they'd ever imagined. Warmth beats cold. Give instead of take. Choose each other. Simple truths, practiced daily, proven countless times across years and rescues, and small moments of compassion that accumulated into something larger. A law that couldn't be frozen. A warmth that couldn't be extinguished. A choice that compounded with every heartbeat, every breath, every moment they woke up and decided to keep living it. The law of warmth, unbreakable,